Welcome to another Glenbrook podcast, and I'm really chuffed to be sitting in Birmingham, our first podcast off-site with Glenn Howells from Howells Architects. Glenn's an old friend, and I will explain how we know each other in a moment. But today we're going to follow the usual format, which is to talk about how we know each other. We're going to talk about Glenn and his education and background and how he got to set up this magnificent business. We're going to talk about the track record of Howells Architects and the route of where they've got to today in the UK and Manchester and Liverpool, and talk about some really interesting projects. We're going to talk about the rebranding from Glenn Howells to Howells and what the future looks like for the business. And then we're going to end up talking about Glenn and his life outside of work. So I'm going to start off how we know each other. And I know you because you did Site 6 of Liverpool 1 when I was working at Grosvenor. That was the Waterstones with the Bridge Street apartments above. And then when I was working in London, you worked for one of your first clients, which we'll talk about, was Benny Gray on the Gray's Antiques Market. And then you're now doing a number of projects for Glenbrook. So that's the background of how we know each other. Yeah. But let's talk about the business and your education. So you've obviously set up this incredible business with how many staff now?
We're about 150.
150, and all between London and Birmingham. Yeah. Where did it all start? So
it all started, the business here, because I only had 2 jobs before I set up on my own. I set up on my own when I was 29 years old. And the reason I set up on my own, I was working for a fantastic guy in London, Robin Spence, who got a very small office, but was one of the most brilliant architects. And he ran out of work in one of the many recessions that we came across. In the 1990s, there's always a recession. There was a recession when I tried to get my first job ever in 1981. So they sort of come along.
And was this about 1989, 90?
It was exactly. And then, so he sadly went out of business, ran out of work. And then I started then to do competitions from my bedroom in London and worked on a number of different opportunities. And I did 2 things. I went to an estate agent, got no money at all, got no work at all. And what I would do is go to an estate agent around the corner, every estate agent in South London, with my headed notepaper and say, "Excuse me, I've run out of headed notepaper. I've got all these fee letters to get out. Do you mind photocopying 10 of these, please?" And they'd be 10 pence a go, so I'll give them £1. And then every 5th estate agent would say, "Somebody just bought a house around the corner. They probably need a survey and might even need an extension." So I would go out every day, and then I'd come back probably with 1 kitchen extension to do.
And that paid the bills. 29 then?
28. I'd lost 27, 28. I'd lost my job. There was no work then. The joke was, what do you say to an architect? And the joke was, "Can I have fries with that burger, please?" That was the time then. And so there was no work around. So I just went and tried to generate work. And then a phone call came in from Benny Gray, and from the RIBA. That's it, because I put my name down for any jobs coming through the RIBA. At that point, they used to recommend architects, and the RIBA called me. And they said, "Oh, we've got a gentleman here who'd like to employ an architect. Would you like to meet him?" So I went up to Gray's in Davies Mews, and Benny Gray sat there. And he gave me the job. And then it was coming up to Birmingham. He said he'd just bought the Custard Factory, which is where I came from.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So let's rewind back to your upbringing and how did you get involved in architecture and property? So was it Stourbridge you were?
Yes, I grew up in Wordsley, which is a village outside of Stourbridge. Only child. My dad was a builder. So all the time I was growing up, I was sort of familiar with the smell of building and materials. And Dad, in the summer holidays, my mum was working somewhere else, so I'd sometimes go along with him. And I just got sort of so I understood what building was about from a very early age.
And you ended up in Plymouth?
Yeah, well, the reason I ended up in Plymouth was my other passion was music at the time. So I was playing in some bands when I was at school, loved music, and decided maybe I'd be a musician instead. So I was in these sort of not great sort of working men's club bands. I was playing there to earn pocket money when I was 17. And in the back page, but it was going nowhere, I could see that. And also, you go to a music shop to look at new instruments, and then you'd realize it was full of 40 and 50 and 60-year-old musicians who'd never made it. And I just thought, actually, this is, unless you're really lucky, music's probably not going to work out. So what happened then was, I was thumbing through the New Musical Express, and on the back page it said, why not study architecture?
What?
Yeah,
You found
in the
course,
classified
yeah,
ads, in the classified ads in the back page. And I just thought, actually, this is a sign. This is a sign. So I think I just thought about it. I thought, no. And anyway, I got a portfolio together, went down and saw them, and it was the last day, and they were just filling the last spaces down at Plymouth Polytechnic, not university those days, and they got me in. And then, Guy, I loved it. I just fell on my feet. I just thought, this is it. I absolutely loved it.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love the stat though, the fact about the NME being where you found about the course.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And how long were you on? Because I don't know the detail, but it's a very long course, isn't it? Architecture.
3 years and then a diploma. There's a postgrad. So I did the full course down there.
So how many years was that?
7 in total.
Yeah.
And then I did my first year out with a lovely practice in Cornwall, which is very small. Learned a lot down there, and then looked after a young lad down there who ultimately came back and worked for me. He was like 0 when I went down there. He only left 5 years ago and went to Australia. So this it's a funny old. Anyway, so I went down to Plymouth.
But people in relationships.
Yeah, that was it. So I went down to Plymouth, had a great time, loved it all, and then when I was leaving, I had a great professor. I was very fortunate, Professor Adrian Gale, and he said, don't go and work for the traditional big practices. He said, well, I'll get you the best experience. He said, these are the 2 people I'd go and work for. And one of them was Robin Spence, who was a friend of his, who used to work with Charles Eames and used to work with the great American architects in the 1970s and 80s. And he was brilliant to work with. So he gave...
And that was in London?
That was in London, yeah.
That was quite a big leap, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But it was great.
Yeah. And so photocopying the letterheads for your 1 in 5.
Well, that was after Robin went out of business.
Yeah.
And then, so I did 3 things happened at the same time. Photocopying letterheads to get kitchen extensions. Number 2, being offered this with Benny.
Yeah.
And then the third thing was, in my spare time, keep on entering open competitions. Because Robin Spence taught me, keep on entering competitions. Just do competition after competition. And that's what we did. And so when I was doing that over there, we were very fortunate. Our big break is we won, as well as doing the Custard Factory, we won Hereford, the new art centre theatre.
Okay, yeah.
And then we entered another one and won another competition, which was the Playbox in Warwick. And after that one, we won our 3rd theatre within 2 years, which was Armagh, Northern Ireland.
No.
Yeah, so we won these open competitions.
Okay. And were you based in London still?
No. As soon as I got the Custard Factory, because my parents lived in Wordsley, I came back up to the Midlands and I was based on site at the Custard Factory.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So the practice was started on paper in 1990 or 1989 down in London, but then we worked up from the Custard Factory, and that's where we started to hire people.
I see. So let's talk about the Custard Factory for one moment, because it's something well worth a visit even today, isn't it? In terms of the amazing walkways internally and elevated. What was the story there? So Benny had Gray's Antiques Market down on Oxford Street, basically, on Davis Street, Oxford Street, with lots of little stalls selling antiques, quite a phenomenal business. And then bought the Custard Factory.
No, there was a couple of other steps. Benny Gray, actually, I regard as being like, he started the cultural industries workplace thing when nobody else was on it, right? So he also had an amazing business in London called Canalot, which was an old canning factory, which he called Canalot, and created the first cluster for creatives, filmmakers and various things. That was in North London.
Yeah.
And then that was a success. So then he bought a big peg up in the Jewellery Quarter to do the same sort of thing. And then the story was, I believe, that in the deeds, he said, and it comes with some other sites down in Digbeth, which was sort of all of the Custard Factory. No. So then when he got the big peg, they said, you better go and look what else you've got. And it was all of the site down in Digbeth.
Was included in the sale?
It was same owner. So then he got this, and he said, right, let's start and turn this into something amazing, the Custard Factory. So he came up with the name, it's the old Bird's Custard Factory.
Yeah.
And then over a course of 2 or 3 years, it was hand to mouth, virtually no money at all. We did it, so all the manufacturers, all the builders were local. all of the people who made the door handles were making them for £1.50 in steel working yards around the corner. So we got to know all the fabricators, most of the subcontractors, and pulled this thing together for like £1.5 million.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was.
And when was this about?
1990.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a big step then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And Benny got great ideas. I remember him saying, he'd say to people, don't get a job, get a customer. And it was all about sort of encouraging your young startups, interesting startups with no covenant, no track record, come and take space. And he said it's counter-cyclical because actually more people start up small businesses when there's a downturn or a recession. So he said it's recession-proof. The Custard Factory was hugely influential because I got to know the mechanics of how you get things built and actually the importance of working with people who make things, right? Which all goes back to where my dad was at. So when you've got very little money, you're forced to be resourceful and come up with ideas.
And not comfortable.
No, and it was so uncomfortable. So we were having to sort of find contractors, reuse steel before it was ecological to do so. We reused every bit we could find on that site in order to bring it back.
Any of this, having walked around it.
Yeah. No, we a lot of the steel work we found in different places. We took it out. We reused everything on that site to create this business, to create that Custard Factory. Anyway, by the time I'd done that for a few years, we'd won all these competitions. And the competition, which was remarkable, actually, so we'd won the three or four theatre competitions. And then we always did this. We started to run out of work. We'd finished this theatre, and then we looked at our business plan, and we were rubbish at business. And so we used all the fees. We were just getting to the end of building this fantastic new theatre somewhere. And then we looked at a cliff financially because we've got no work. And I remember somebody said, oh, in the Architects Journal, there's just been an advert for a new competition. I said, what's that? They said, it's Urban Splash. Have you heard of them? I said, I know them because they came down to the Custard Factory because Tom was doing the same up in Manchester. Okay. He was doing Affleck's Palace.
So that's literally the overlap.
Yeah. So then we entered this competition. It was an anonymous competition, so I couldn't let Tom know that I was doing it, even though I'd already met him. And it was an international competition. And we eventually won it. And I think what won it was a new form of housing, Urban Splash's first new build project. And we went in and we pitched to Urban Splash, Jonathan, Nick Johnson and Tom at the time. And we said, okay, you do converted factories. That's what you do. And we think they're amazing. So we're going to build you effectively a warehouse, a wharf building, and you can convert it. And it's going to be naked. It's going to be really raw, and there's going to be no plasterboard. It's all going to be concrete and glass, and that's what we're going to make it out. What you see is what you get. And Tom said, don't think much of the drawings, but that idea, we can do that. So we won it in the end.
My goodness me. So what, that would have been mid-90s?
Mid-90s, 94, 95.
And what was the building?
Timberwolf.
Oh, okay.
Where they're still based.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So that was literally the segue between...
Well, that was into... up until then, we'd never done any housing, right? So we'd been doing theatres, arts buildings, and the Custard Factory. And then, and we stepped into then... But it was everything came together actually on Timberwolf because we'd learned how to be lean, to do things for not a lot of money and to do them so they were elegant and working with trades. So we worked on that one with Trent. No, it wasn't Trent. It was Bison Precast at the time and Graham Paddock and a few others. And they said, if you want to do a really efficient building out of concrete, this is it. And they introduced us to people who were then in their 60s who were the experts in concrete. And they said, this is how you do a beautiful concrete building.
And that relationship with Splash still continues because we're doing something together down at Milton Keynes. Just going back to Timberwolf, quite interesting because the inner ring road was a huge boundary for living. So the city got to the inner ring road you had to do something pretty affordable and special to encourage people to breach that, the ring road basically, didn't you?
Yeah.
So that was the start then of Ellesmere Street where we've done two big schemes.
Yeah, exactly.
People living up there, and it's probably got as far as it'll get to that Pomona Wharf. Pomona Wharf will come eventually.
And I still go back to Timberwolf, not only because Tom's business is based in it, but my daughter was moved up to Manchester, and she's moved into Timberwolf.
Well, I've got a note here. I was going to bring it up. I was going to bring Martha, who's your wonderful daughter, who works in property in Manchester, but not in property. She's in marketing. Is that right?
Yeah, digital marketing.
And basically, she lives in one of your buildings, which is quite a cool thing, I think, isn't it?
And it's lovely to go back there because now it's got a residence group. People are quite proud of it,
Yeah.
I think. And it's weathered, but it's got a patina of age around it, which when you design things, you don't expect them to sort of age, but they do.
The interface with the canal is always an interesting one for me because it's amazing location. But there's this interface between who owns the building, who owns the canal, and the Canals and Rivers Trust probably don't take as much care or ownership. They leave it to the community to take care of it, I always think, because they've got such a big undertaking. And it's quite an interesting interface, and I like it. So it's still we go there for meetings, and it's still very functional and cool building. So an Urban Splash, that relationship continues, as I said, through to the very day. But it's not just smaller regional developers, it's very large developers like Grosvenor, and that's, I mean, we jumped forward many years there. We were talking mid-90s. In around 2002 you got involved in the master plan of Liverpool 1, and we had 30 different architects have plots, parts of Liverpool 1. Talk us through, I mean, Rod Holmes was the guy who was the brainchild of that at Grosvenor. How did you get involved? Do you have to do a competition if you remember? Or
I don't know how we got involved. I think, how did we get involved? Somehow I bumped into Ed's. No, we got a phone call and it said, well, we've got this interesting project in Liverpool. Would you like to come and have a conversation? We're sort of assembling a team of architects. And I met Rod Holmes, and he was a genius. And
it certainly was that.
And he was so creative. I mean, his energy level and his ambition to do something which was not just good, which was outstanding, just led that project. He was amazing.
So Site 6, I think, is really interesting because there's two buildings that are almost, were very, very complicated. And yours was one of them because it trades as a Waterstones on the first floor. I think the second floor, it's 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, 67 I think it is, 78 1 and 2 bedroom apartments at the Bridgegate Apartments, but then it's got active frontages down on Paradise Street. It's got all sides of the building have to be active. It's got this tremendous slotted facade. The buildings don't get, and it's got an underground service yard as well, which goes into the Liverpool 1 service yard. Buildings don't get much more complicated than that. And building within a master plan with interaction to, I think, is it Stevenson Bell, one of the architects next door? And, really complicated building.
But it was great because Rod brought the whole team together. We were not in competition. He got everyone to believe and to understand that the composition of all the different buildings together had to be great. So it was never playing off different designers, and it was that idea of 1 + 1 + 1 can equal 5 if you get it right. And so we were led by Rod and his sort of energy and ambition for the whole site, and it was a joy to work on. It was great. So we'd meet Rod up at the facade contractors, I think up in Doncaster.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we'd be up there at 8 o'clock. He'd travel further than I would, and he'd be there an hour earlier.
The energy. I mean, the poor guy now is Rod is. He's an old man now in the sense of, he was 65 when he retired, and that was on the day of opening Liverpool 1. But we still chat about Liverpool 1, and we got the magnificent book. I think actually your building is on the cover of the Liverpool 1 book. Actually,
is it really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if you speak to him at any time soon, please say hello.
Well, he's still very interested in all that we do. Manchester and Liverpool. So we talk about Liverpool 1. The other project I didn't know you did, and I think I was amazed when I looked it up, it was 2010, is the steps and the point of arrival outside Lime Street Station in Liverpool.
We actually won a competition there with, I think it was the Liverpool Regeneration Company. Was it Liverpool 1?
No, it was Liverpool Vision.
Liverpool Vision. And we won a competition there to do a landmark tower, the Gateway Tower, right next to, taking down the concrete building, all the shops, which then hid the front. And we came up with the idea of stripping away all of that, revealing Lime Street.
The arches.
Facing onto St. George's, all the rest of it, and replacing that tower with, it was a World Heritage Site. From a planning point of view, it was incredibly difficult. And then guess what happened? I think we were hit with another recession. The tower no longer was viable. But actually, there was such an overwhelming case to redo the entrance into the station. We did that.
Well, I think it's really interesting, and I still think about it, and I didn't know it was yours, is that the stone is cut, laser cut, water cut,
Yeah.
I think, and when you walk up there, I'm sure lots of our listeners will walk up those steps, and still today it feels really fresh 15 years later, so it's quite remarkable.
Well, it was a real sort of honour to work in such a prestigious location, and you realise what a collection St George's Hall, and then the station itself. This amazing sort of composition of buildings. And our job was to reveal it. It was very simple, actually. But it was all about the levels, that job.
Just about the levels, as
Yeah,
in,
it was. Well,
how you
the
get
slope,
people-
yeah, that's it, yeah.
absolutely. So staying up north, Manchester, you've done two stonking big office schemes in the centre of Manchester, which I don't think everybody knows they're yours, actually. I think that's, so 125 Deansgate,
Yeah.
which is a phenomenal building, and the other one is on St Peter's Square, so 1 St Peter's Square. Obviously, 1 St Peter's Square was before 125
Yeah.
Deansgate. Tell us a little bit about your office buildings in Manchester, because they are huge buildings.
We did 1 St Peter's Square first, and again, it was a competition. We bid and we won it for Argent, who got the site then working with the local authority's pension fund.
Yeah.
And so it was a
And was that, you've done numerous deals with Argent?
Yeah. And we were working with Argent at Brindley Place, so we knew them. Great developer again. And then they invited us to work on that one. And then it was really about, again, it was about the setting. What we say a lot of the time is, it's not about landmark buildings, it's about landmark places.
Yeah.
And so it was actually judging the relationship of the building, the new building, replacing the old one, to the library and to the local authority offices, to the town hall. And it was an amazing collection of buildings that we had the responsibility of recreating the edges to St Peter's Square, and it was a great project. Everybody knew how important it was, and working with Dave Roscoe was incredible on it, because he said, this is an important building, not just for me, but for the leader and the chief exec, and everybody's going to be watching it going up. And I'd have calls from Dave Roscoe on a Saturday. I'd be on the beach in Wales and saying, Glenn, I'm a bit worried. One of the concrete panels has arrived and it's got a chip in it. Can you have a look at it?
The facade is amazing.
Yeah.
Still look at it now, and it's just, but there isn't anything else like it in Manchester, is there?
I think we learnt a lot from Timberwolf and working with the old concrete experts at all the different, so Trent Concrete we got to know, Techcrete, all the people working in concrete in the country, we would spend time talking to about the aggregates, the detailing. The trick with concrete is it's making sure that it weathers beautifully. So it's about the way it sheds water. And we've spent ages worrying about St Peter's Square, because if it gets wet and doesn't dry out, it'll stain and all the rest of it. And that's why classical buildings, don't forget, we've got all the mouldings and everything else. So we spent ages worrying through how the building stays fresh and clean.
There's a building which I won't name in central Manchester, which is brand new, just opened, and it's got green lichen staining down the facade. No, and it's only just opened.
Yeah.
And it just looks so sad.
Yeah.
So I know what you're talking about.
So 125 Deansgate was right opposite the listed library,
John Islands,
which is beautiful. And I believe that's a sandstone building, isn't it? It's beautiful. And what we wanted to do was to pick up on the palette of materials which is Manchester's made of. So many great stone buildings, but also this heritage of clay buildings, a Midland Hotel and some others. And we just thought, let's see what we could do. And those great buildings, it's never about the aluminium glazing. So what we tried to do was do a building where what you saw was one building. The John Rylands building got stone mullions, very fine glazing lines. So what we wanted to do, it was a building which was terracotta and was immaculate and was of one material. So I challenge you to see the aluminium. There's virtually no aluminium on show.
The colours are phenomenal. That's the bit that I think is...
And we drove NBK mad on that job. NBK made the terracotta for us. And again, the idea that we always work with manufacturers from day one. And Dave Roscoe was involved. So we built the sample panel, and NBK said we usually build gaps in the terracotta of 20 mil. And I think it was Dave Roscoe said to us, well, that's interesting, because all the best buildings have got joints which are about 5 millimeters between the terracotta. So we work with them to shrink down all the gaps and tighten up all the building, and that's why it's as good as it is.
But what I think for me is interesting, you wouldn't know that 125 and 1 St. Peter's Square are by the same architect.
Oh, really?
I don't think so. I think they're both a very different approach to a really key building, and I love them both.
Well, we try not to do a house style. We try every project is an opportunity to think through what that site needs, what the client wants to achieve, and what it could do.
Well, I know a number of architects who have a house style, and you certainly don't have a house style between those two buildings. So staying in Manchester, I'm really interested about a really quirky and reasonably small project, but probably not tiny, is the new services that you're working on out by the airport. So when we were just walking in, we saw the model of the Gloucester services for the Westmoreland family. I think they did the services at Shap. Then they did
it was at Gloucester Services. It was just outside of where do you say it was?
So you got the first services up at Shap, which is on the M6, and then you got the Gloucester services down just between Bristol and Birmingham.
Oh yeah. So they did T-Bay. It's
T-Bay,
T-Bay. Yeah, which is up on the M6, which we went to see when we went. It was another open. It was a competition where we were up against one of 6 practices, I believe, and that was 15 years ago. And that was an amazing journey with the Dunning family. It's a family business, and and what was great about that is they wanted a completely genuine alternative to the motorway services offer. So they asked us to work with them on reimagining it not just in terms of the design, but in terms of local produce, dog walking, breaking down the boundaries. So it was a great opportunity to rethink something from first principles.
But from what you've been doing as a business to then go do a services when all we've got in the country are pretty mundane services, it was a reinvention of the motorway services, wasn't it, at Gloucester?
But one of the lovely things about this job, Guy, is what gets you out of bed in the morning, same as what gets you out of bed, is when someone says, have a go at rethinking this. Yeah, turning something on its head and rethinking it from first principles.
Proper design.
Proper thinking.
Yeah.
I say to our guys here, just say, before you show me a shape or we start working on the look of a building, what's the idea? What is the idea, the key idea within it that's going to make it successful?
I was blown away by that. But then referring back to the one in Manchester, it's a really tricky site. So it's only on one side of the motorway. It's where the road comes in, a motorway comes around, circles around. There's a plot of land that's landlocked. And you got planning there. I think it was in the green belt or whatever. But, what's the plan there in terms of more of the same as Gloucester?
Gloucester was 15 years old now. Couldn't believe it.
Is it really?
I think we're 10 or 15. But it was done. And then it's been copied a lot. The greatest flattery is when somebody copies it. And so lots of the mainstream motorway providers have already seen it and they can reinterpret that. So doing a timber building, even supermarkets are made out of timber now. But it was, how do we take the next big step in terms of motorway services and what that means for the motorway network and for people with vehicles? And of course, the big change is over that period of time is electric vehicles and the move away from pollution and towards carbon emissions. And so what we started on that one, the big idea was how we do a truly, genuinely sustainable building. And that's not just trotting out the same greenwash that you see everywhere, which is it looks green. So it was actually doing the math properly on energy, electric generation, storage of energy. And so every level of that project is a thought-through piece of design in terms of creating energy on site. So all of the buildings are orientated north-south with optimum roof pitches, so it all collects energy. We then store energy. We've got battery position on site. There was an old farm there, and we're recreating the idea that you can actually produce some of the things that you would consume on site. So it returns to being productive landscape, all the way through to turning barren fields into a much richer ecology through the way that we use water and landscape. And so we create something which is productive, environmentally responsible and sustainable, but also is beautiful. Because what we're trying to do, a bit like Gloucester, is create a situation that when you come off the motorway network and off the A roads around it, you're in an environment which is really brilliant to be in, with walled gardens and landscape and experiences.
It's a destination.
Yeah, that's the idea.
The proof was that one weekend with a party at home, and I think about 5 people brought me gifts from Gloucester Service.
Oh, really?
They've been coming out from Bristol or South Wales. And I think that's a sign of success. The people are not going there as a motorway services. They're going there as a destination on their journey and for a proper break.
But that's a great thing about this job. You know, it's an absolute privilege because you get chance to work with people throughout their lives and throughout your career on developing the next part of that story. And it's a great privilege.
So has anybody from outside of the UK come and taken up the offer of the business in terms of, I think you're doing some stuff in Europe, is that right? Or...
Yeah, and these things, Guy, I don't know how they come about. And it's a bit like how I met you and Rod, and then Benny Gray, and then the Argent lot, and Ballymore, and all the people we continue to work with closely. You sort of stumble into each other through something you don't quite know how it happens. So
what's going to happen? What's going to work?
Exactly. So I bumped into somebody when I was looking at buildings in South America, who comes from Serbia, and he said, "Oh, I do development. Would you like to stay in touch?" 5 years on, we've looked at a few things with him, and then we're working on the reconstruction of an old tractor factory, which takes me back mentally to the first phone call I had with Benny Gray about the Custard Factory. Except we've learned a lot since. So we're working on that great regeneration project in Serbia. We're looking at something in Poland with some friends who used to work here. So the one thing I've learned is the contacts and the people you meet have got a habit of then coming all the way back round. As Tom Bloxham said to me one day, he says, be very good to people on the way up because you pass them on the way down. And the people who work for us often become our employers.
Absolutely. I can't believe, well, like we're sitting here, but the reason we're talking here today is because you're doing work with us now on a number of things. And I think I came in pleading for some introductions to Benny Gray back in the day. It was when we reignited our relationship. And that's just funny how those things happen. What's your proudest thing? I know the thing I'm most impressed by in your resume is the Remembrance Centre at Westonbirt. I think that's really deep and meaningful and fabulous. But what's your proudest thing that you've achieved in the business?
The business itself, actually, because it's got people in it. And I've been working with some of the people for over 30 years. And it's not me. This thing is phenomenal, this organisation, because what we've managed to develop is a common sort of approach to doing things together and sharing ideas and being able to get excited and working together and supporting each other. So without that, because I haven't designed any of these buildings, I've been a part of it. We couldn't have done any of this unless we got these brilliant sort of spirit and group of people working together.
And the building, I think, is really special. So we were walking down from the bullring just now, and I pointed out the building, and it is a bit of it's a very different looking building from the outside than the inside. The inside is tremendous, all white and absolutely beautiful, and lots of space, lots of air. Floor to ceilings are massive, and it takes a long time to climb the 3 flights of stairs to get here, and that's really special inside. But just talk about when you got the building, when did you move here, and what was the thought process behind that? And also, you know, it's a very, very big building, isn't it?
I'd have never bought this building without someone called Igor Kolodochko, and he was a client at the time. And this came on the market for £300,000, and I would have never had the courage to do anything like that. I was just doing buildings. And he said, come on. He said, you'll be paying rent all your life. Why not? He said, we'll buy it together. He said, I'll go halves with you. And so we bought it, and then we spent a bit of money doing it up as cheaply as we could. And then he said, I don't want, you can have it all now. And so I bought him out. But what it gave us the chance to just grow and use it as a lab. So this thing is really brilliant, and that we don't have to worry about a landlord. We've just moved the model shop up to another floor. We play with the building, and it gives us, we've got 30,000 square feet we share with other people, but we can do what we want. And then next door, we're doing a project with E.H. Smith, the builders merchants, because they've come into this story and they go, we want to have our materials lab next door. So they're going to be doing their facade products next door. Really? Yeah, they're on site with it now. So I just think it's given us elbow room to explore and not get. And so it's not a nice building on the outside. It's it's on the back of the coach station, but actually what it gives us is potential to just play and have models, one-to-one mock-ups. We can just do what we want
You've
with
got
it.
space.
Yeah.
It's a really good atmosphere, and it's special. And the fact is, you've got an open floor plate with everybody. You can see everybody, and you've got a full house. So,
and just going back to your other question, of course, I'm hugely proud of all of the projects that we've worked on, and there are a few of them that stand out. The ones where we work with subcontractors to create something which is really, really groundbreaking. So I think the Savile building, we worked with Green Oak Carpentry Company. Timberwolf, we worked with.
Yeah.
We worked with Bison Concrete and with people on that one. When we did the National Memorial Arboretum, I mean, all of these projects, and then we did the walkway down at Westonbirt, which is, and so we've got a clutch of projects which are very close to my heart, which have propelled us. Then, like you do what certain projects, then all of a sudden just energize the whole business for the next 2 or 3 years.
Your relationship with Ballymore is pretty astounding. And next door to the Gloucester Services on the wall, on the model outside, is a vast project alongside the Thames.
Yeah.
Should we just talk about that? Because that's something that's just of a different.
Yeah, I mean, Ballymore are exceptional in terms of their energy. And so, I got to know them because of a project in Birmingham, which in the banking crisis stopped. And then, but we met each other through that. And then they said, okay, well, since we're in the banking crisis and Ballymore suffered worse than many developers in the banking crisis, gradually built their way out and recovered. But one of those projects was Royal Wharf, which was a huge site on the side of the Thames, where we got permission working with the local Greater London GLA and with Newham to create this new district. And it was amazing that coming out of the banking crisis, Ballymore just got on and built it. So 4,500 homes in just over 5 years.
4,500 homes. And the other thing I was pointing out about that is it's not high rise, is it?
No, it's moderate. I mean, I think increasingly we're going back to looking at sites and going, only because of cost, but also that, fire safety and other reasons, that we're increasingly, it's about making landmark places, not about just making landmark buildings. That's what, so brilliant homes for people, which then create a neighborhood and a community, that's what that project's about.
And you're doing more with Ballymore. You're doing stuff over in Ireland as well.
Yeah, we're working in London. We've got an interesting project on in London. We've been working in Brentford with them. We've worked at Canary Wharf, but now we're working in just south of Dublin on a project which is on site. Yeah,
incredible. So let's talk about Howells again. The rebranding from Glenn Howells Architects. I probably got all the names wrong, but it's Howells Architects now.
Yeah, we went. In fact. It wasn't my idea to rebrand. A couple of people said, well, we came up to 30 years. What should we do? And I said to the guys, I said to my partners, I said, it's over to you because you're going to be leading on most of this. I'm not going anywhere, but it's your business now. What do you want to call it? You get rid of my name completely if you want. It's got to be something that you feel that you can sort of get behind and drive forward for the next 30 years. And so anyway, they came around with it. I was quite pleased. They said, actually, we don't want to lose any reference to where we came from because we've got all this track record of amazing work. If somebody Googles Gloucester Services or wants to look at Timberwolf or the Mull Ryan Centre for Dance, it ought to be in there. And so we didn't want to break with the tradition. But there was something about losing my first name, which I think was really positive because it's not me personally leading the business anymore. I'm part of it, and it's much bigger than just me. And then the other thing was architects. Whilst we still do architecture, we work on projects which are bigger than just buildings. And so something where actually it was a simpler name, it was a simpler idea, that it was one word and you can go to it and you can get everything from a tiny thing designed, a piece of furniture or an object, all the way through to a master plan. And it gives us the ability to do that. Yeah. And I'm delighted not to hear my Christian name used in meetings.
Well, I think it has taken another step up since that. Because I'm
delighted to hear that.
But it does, because it becomes, it's almost a fresh it's an intent for the future and what that looks like. In terms of the business and the size, you've got a London office as well.
Yeah, we got about 50 people in London, about 100 in Birmingham. Yeah.
And where's that in London?
Very close to Euston, so I can walk from Euston Station.
Yeah, really interesting. I think one of the things how we know each other as well is what you do outside of work. So you and I quite often touch base down in a pub called George III Pub on the banks of the river by Dolgellau. Tell us about how you ended up and how you relax down in Wales.
Well, when you're growing up in the Midlands and your family hasn't got a load of money, you go on holiday to North Wales. And so we were always going, in my dad's Morris Minor to North Wales. And then we got to know the area around Dolgellau. And so when I had 2 kids, and my dad said, well, why don't you just think about going over to Wales? And so we went over there for holidays and then got to love the area again, and then decided that we would buy a very modest little place up in the woods there, which we bought. And it's great. So 2 hours from Birmingham, I'm in the national park, and it's an amazing place. And we spend time there. We're doing some modest forestry work. We're rebuilding some of the area around it. But also, it gives me the opportunity to go to the lovely George pub, which is over the other side of the river. And that's where I bump into you all the time.
And you've picked up some jobs down there randomly, haven't you? You done a job or two down in Dolgellau?
We did a house for Gavin Lockhart, who's a brilliant painter and my oldest friend. And he came into a little bit of money and said, I'd like to build a house on some land. And I found the site for him. And then we designed the house together, and I'm very proud of it, even though it's a single-story house.
It's stunning.
Have you been to see it? Have you been up there?
I've been to see it.
Oh, well, I'll take you up to it.
It is stunning. It's an area, I think, I'm very fond of that part of the world as well. I think it's pretty undiscovered. When the weather's bad, no one goes there. And then when the sun's out, everybody goes there. So
and the nature there is incredible. It's beautiful. So it's my sort of counterpoint. In order to, I never want to stop work, right? Bit like you, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Because why stop doing something that you absolutely love? But in order to continue working hard, you need to counterpoint, which is to be in nature.
Are you dragged into lots of things outside of Howells and outside of your personal life, like being on boards and committees and all that sort of thing?
I have been. I've been on several charities and I've loved all of them. I've just stood down after my term ended at the Hippodrome, and I did that for years. And but I'm not doing a lot of that anymore, because what I'm trying to do is, I'm 62 now, is to build a bit of time for a few things which I want to do and to explore and to have a bit more fun.
Yeah. And that's why we keep giving you more jobs, because it doesn't take that away. And that I think we'll draw it to a close. But I think one of the interesting things about you is that you are hands-on on things. We had a chat before this podcast about one of the projects we're working on, and you know the detail. You're involved in how many projects? You must have 50 projects on the go at one time, probably. And you know the detail on, I suspect, most of them, because you're interested and you're passionate and you keep involved.
I don't get involved in running the business. So we've got a very good expert non-exec chairman, John Crabtree, and he came into this business. He said, you seem to be not a bad architect, but a terrible businessman. He said, we better equip you with one. So we've now got a team that looks after the business.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, it releases me, because all I want to do is work on the projects, not design them all.
And that's where the value is.
But it's a great joy to sit down with a 30-year-old architect and for them to tell me and explain what their idea of it is, and then I can hopefully get excited and add something to them. So none of this work that any of us do is a solo. I don't know, it's like every project that I've worked on has been great because it's had a number of people with different world experiences working on it.
Well, from the start of the discussion on your career, from the New Musical Express, where you found out about Plymouth University or Plymouth College, through to having a huge business here and in London, and being very active still to this day, and hopefully for the future. Really pleased to have run through that with you and understand more about the business and learn about the real Glenn Howells. So thank you very much for today, and hope you've enjoyed the experience.
I've loved it. It's been the best start to the week I can remember.
Well, thank you
very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.